Greetings and welcome back to Room 303 and our chats with Emily as we are calling readings through the poetry of Emily Dickinson. We are in the Thomas H. Johnson edition. We turn now to poem 670, One Need Not Be a Chamber to Be Haunted. One of Emily's most anthologized poems. We are back to the ontological tension that Emily will play with, the question of who am I? As part of our Big Five, you will recall in our Big Five study, 1, epistemology, what can you know? 2, ontology, who are you? 3, psychology. 4, sociology. And then finally the question of theodicy, or pain and suffering. And I think in this poem we're going to get to the true pain that Emily will often talk about, the psychic pain, the spiritual pain. In many ways, we're back to poems 292, 458, 631, 632, 532, and 642. All of these poems we've already covered. And our assumptions are that you've been following our stuff at learnstrong.net, down that left-hand side, chats with Emily, our playlist, and that you have been working not only with our set of introductory comments, but also with those preceding 669 poems. We just finished with 669, No Romance Sold Unto. And that romance that's referenced in that earlier poem, romance novels, will often play that game of the haunted house, of the scary things. We think, of course, of any number of novels of that time period that will play that game. Now, when this one was published in 1891, it's actually called Ghosts. Emily herself, of course, never called it that. I want to argue again, though, that Emily may be the greatest poet of psychology of all time. I mean, I'll leave it to you guys to decide on this one. But she loves to play with what the one scholar has called the diseased mind, or the diseased mind, as opposed to an eased mind. The scholar Priest has pointed out what Sewell also has argued. The poem may have been suggested to Emily by the great Thomas à Kempis's line in his Imitation of Christ, quote, "Wheresoever thou goest, thou carriest thyself with thee, and shalt ever find thyself," end quote. In a letter, number 399, to her friend Mrs. Holland, Emily wrote, quote, "The giant in the human heart was never met outside." In other words, the true challenge is the psychic challenge. The question, of course, is what's it like to meet your true self? You'll remember, of course, the Oracle of Delphi, the famous Greek idea, is know thyself, right? And what does that even mean? One scholar has called this poem the treatment of the terrain of the divided self and the fearful discovery that can be made of that. That is to say, Emily's going to argue in this poem that the interior world is actually way more important and profound than the external or the material world. So that interior is way, way more challenging. One scholar Suzanne Joos has said it this way, Dickinson's, quote, "Architectural vocabulary usually portrays the mind as an enclosed space, its confinement responsible for power and safety, yet also for a feel for confrontation," end quote. Now, I think that Emily is, as one scholar has pointed out, she's continually drawn to the dangerous, authentic feeling, what she'll say in poem 292, to go above your nerve. Another scholar has called this a game designed to unsettle the reader. And it is true, this poem that I want to credit my Emily group with helping me work through, I had to admit that this poem raised some very disturbing questions about the life of the mind, as opposed to, of course, the other life. She says it this way, "One need not be a chamber to be haunted. One need not be a house. The brain has corridors surpassing material place, far safer of a midnight meeting external ghost than its interior confronting that cooler host. Far safer through an abbey gallop, the stones chase, than unarmed one's a self encounter in lonesome place. Ourself, behind ourself, concealed, should startle most. Assassin hid in our apartment be horror's least. The body borrows a revolver, he bolts the door, or looking a superior specter, or more." Now, of course, we're going to make much of that final 2 words of this poem, or more, but let's start with the word one. Notice the impersonal language here. Notice it's not, "I need not be a chamber," or you need not be a chamber, or we need not be a chamber, but rather one need not be a chamber. That is to say, a haunted house, right? To be haunted. Now, we're going to go from haunted to horror, so pay attention to it. And notice, she'll say it again, one need not be a house. So we've seen this in Emily before. She borrows this heavily from her reading of the King James Old Testament especially. That is to say, there's this repeat oftentimes in Hebrew poetry where you say it, then you say it again. You don't have to be in a haunted house to be afraid. Right? The brain, which will take us back, you'll remember the poem 556. You guys remember when we did this one? She'll often use the word brain to actually talk about the mind. The brain within its groove runs evenly and true, but let a splinter swerve 'twere easier for you to put a current back when floods have slit the hills and scooped a turnpike for themselves and trodden out the mills. By the way, it will be in this groove, in this poem, corridor in the poem that we're studying. You guys will remember when we did 632, the brain is wider than the sky, for put them side by side, the one other will contain with ease, and you beside. The brain is deeper than the sea, for hold them blue to blue, the one the other will absorb as sponges buckets do. The brain is just the weight of God, for heft them pound for pound, and they will differ if they do a syllable from sound. This idea then that the brain, the mind, has corridors, halls, surpassing, that is to say, scarier, material place. In other words, our first argument is, you think being frightened of a haunted house is scary. Think about her contemporary, of course, Poe, and his Fall of the House of Usher is our most famous story about a haunted house. She says, I can tell you there's something way more scary than a haunted house. And it is the haunted house, right? The haunted house. She'll say it again to repeat herself. Notice this, far safer, right? Far safer of a midnight meeting, what Shakespeare will call the witching hour, right? External ghost. Now, you'll remember this ghost referencing from poem 274. And we saw when we did that poem a number of references to this idea of the ghost. We saw it in 75, in 184, in 281, in 311, and 413. We're seeing it obviously now in 670. We'll see it again in 817, in 892, in 1400, and in 1593. In all of those, she'll reference this idea of the ghost. In 892, it will be territory for the ghosts, and in 1400, it will be simplified her ghosts. This idea that the ghost, the unknown. And she says, yeah, there is an external ghost that might be scary, but it's nothing, right? It's way safer, in fact, than its interior confronting. Confronting may be the key word of the poem. That cooler host. In other words, the thing that's even more frightening is the mind itself. Far safer, she repeats it. Far safer through an abbey gallop, right? Past a church. Gallop, the stones a chase. In other words, the dead rise up from the cemetery of the abbey and chase you. That's way easier to handle than unarmed, maybe another key word of the poem, one's a self encounter in lonesome place. Again, lonesome might be the key word of the poem as well. It's way scarier to meet yourself than it is to meet any kind of dead ghost rising from the dead. And then she'll say it. The line that for some of you is the key Emily line that you will have read thus far in all of your study. Ourself behind ourself, concealed. And of course, this word concealed is so powerful. You'll remember when we did 422, the Ethiopia within, and I think there is this notion that, yes, of course, we have, as we commented in our Big Five observations about ontology, we have this ability to be aware that we are thinking. Of course, if I tell you now, don't think about pink elephants, the one thing you're thinking about, of course, is pink elephants. But I can also point out to you that you can be aware that you are thinking about pink elephants. Well, okay, so what is it that's thinking about the pink elephants? Well, that's my mind. Well, then what is it that's aware that your mind is thinking about pink elephants? It almost seems as if there's something standing behind the mind that's capable of witnessing the mind. Like, what is that exactly? Okay, the self behind the self. Ourself behind ourself, concealed, should startle most. That's what's really freaky, she says. By the way, notice the repetition of the sounds: ghost, host, most. And then she'll come back to it again. Assassin, somebody out to kill you. Hid in our apartment, somebody hiding in your house. be horror's least. Again, we go from haunted to horror. That's nothing, right? Compared to the mind. And then she'll say it one more time. The body. So notice, she keeps coming back to it to make these juxtapositions between the physical and the metaphysical. Borrows a revolver when we get to poem 754. My life had stood a loaded gun. We'll come back to this idea of the revolver. Well, in other words, the person, right, the man or the woman, they get frightened. They borrow a revolver. They bolt the door shut. And again, we're back to Emily and her doors, as we've commented so many times. Or looking a superior specter. In other words, yeah, you think you're hiding with your door shut and your revolver. You're protecting yourself from the assassin or the enemy that could get to you, and you're scared. But that's nothing compared to the fear of meeting the self behind the self. Or looking a superior specter, from ghost to specter, right? Or more. Now, some have made an observation that in the Mark 5:8-9 story with Jesus Christ, when he met someone who had possessed by demons, the demon spoke and said, my name is Legion, for we are many. And some have pointed out that this or more is Emily's expectation of fearful suspense of things to come. In other words, there's things you can't even imagine that are way more frightening than some ghost coming to get you or some assassin coming to get you. When we come to poem 683, we'll play this game again. We'll come back to this poem a number of times, guys. The soul unto itself is an imperial friend, or the most agonizing spy an enemy could send. Secure against its own, no treason it can fear itself, it's sovereign of itself. The soul should stand in awe. And when we get to poem 1328, we'll come back to this one again. The vastest earthly day is shrunken small by one defaulting face behind a pall. And finally, when we get to 1323, we'll read it this way. I never hear that one is dead without the chance of life, afresh annihilating me, that mightiest belief, too mighty for the daily mind, that tilling its abyss had madness, had it once or twice the yawning consciousness. Beliefs are bandaged, like the tongue when terror, were it told, in any tone commensurate would strike us instant dead. I do not know the man so bold, he dare in lonely place that awful stranger consciousness deliberately face. Okay, what are we going to do with a poem like this at 2A for messages? I think our argument is that the role or the challenge of the artist is to face the other self behind the self, even though it is frightening. Emily, I think, is the poet maybe the most, I don't know, guys, it's hard to put her beneath any other poet. Maybe Dante is her contemporary, maybe Shakespeare contemporary here, but Emily, this is her project. She wants to know what is the self behind the self. That's what her interests are, and to meet the scariest parts of her psyche. At 2B, well, obviously symbolism is replete in this, especially the symbol of the haunted house in the mind. At 3A, well, obviously we mentioned Poe's Fall of the House of Usher. I'd like to as well think about the analysis that Freud will make. Some have even argued this poem is an epigraph to his writings on the unconscious, or the subconscious as it later would be called. Finally, at 3B, what was a time in your life when you had to meet the self behind the self? And to what degree was it a superior specter? I hope Emily's challenging him. Thank you.